Hello and welcome to the podcast Mosaic Art Behind the Scenes. This is our fifth episode, and today we have a great mosaic artist who's located in San Antonio, Texas. His name is David Chidgey, and a graduate from the University of Texas in Austin with a degree in political science and foreign languages. He also did a graduate school in School of Psychology and spent his career working in the special education field. He does say he doesn't have an art background, but I say he does. I think he always had it, and he recently had just let it come out with these great mosaics that he does. He does mandalas. He does these very unique pieces with ceramic that he's going to talk to us about. And he currently has his mosaic studio from his residence in San Antonio, where he teaches and creates very original mosaic art with ceramics and many types of glass, from bullseye glass and just other materials that he can get around from that area or just get some shipped in. And I'm honored to have a great person join this podcast. So please let me present you, David Chidgey. How are you? How's it
I'm
going,
good,
David?
Carlos. Thank you so much. Um,
No, thank you.
I think I'm going to just start with saying my last name because it's really a hard one for people.
Yes, it
It's
is. Chidgey?
Chidgey. Chidgey.
Chidgey.
Right.
Chidgey.
But anyway, thank you for having me. And it is true. I really started my first mosaic other than an ashtray at a church camp when I was
Yeah, I
probably
read
8
that.
years old. Was creating a small mandala that you would hang, kind of a sun catcher, something you'd hang in your window. And I literally started doing those when that was probably in about 2002. And I made hundreds of those. I got kind of obsessed with those, and I loved really hunting for the glass. The glass was really part of the exciting part because you had to actually look at the glass to make sure it would be really rich when it's up in the window and the light behind it. So I did that. And what happened was about 3 years into that, I got an email from a landscape architect in New York wanting me to do an outside feature for residents. And basically, by doing that commission, I had money, which I could then kind of reinvest. And I found out more about the world of mosaics. And I started taking workshops. My first mosaic workshop was with Ilana Shafir, who people may know about. She was Israeli artist, and she's pretty well known for her unique mosaics, which included lots of her personalized ceramic creations.
Does she reside in the U.S.? Does she reside in the U.S. or
No? She actually resided in Israel.
Okay.
And she would come to the U.S. The first time I met her, she was at the SAMA conference, the first SAMA conference in Chicago. I think that was 2006. And I kind of weaseled my way into being her helper during that workshop she gave because I couldn't get into the workshop because I was too late. But
yeah,
I asked if I could be her
sell
helper,
out
and
pretty
she said,
fast.
"Why not?" So anyway, I got to know her that way, and then I actually took two workshops, a 4-day workshop at the Chicago Mosaic School in 2006, I believe, later. And then the next year, I took it again. It was a 2-day workshop. What I found is that if you go to a really great workshop, you can only take in as much as you are ready to take in. And what I knew is after the 4 days, there was a lot more I really could take in if I could just go back. So I think that was kind of the beginning of looking at ceramics as part of a mosaic. And I think I finally, at first, I kind of discounted creating my own ceramics simply because I didn't really have the background, and I didn't have a kiln, and I didn't know anybody who did, and all these kind of reasons. But after taking her workshop the second time, it became totally clear that her work would not be what it is if she didn't create so many of those ceramic elements.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the seeds for me to integrate ceramics into my work.
Well, you've been doing a lot of work. I just saw your webpage also, artclassmosaics.com. Actually, if you guys want to look at it, I know in audio, people who are listening to this podcast, you can look at the website or you can look at the YouTube channel to see this actual video. He's actually in the studio right now. I can see these beautiful mosaics in the background. So he's been doing them ever since he learned about them way back, but he just recently, like once he started to discover, and after what he said about the Chicago Mosaic School, which is one of the schools that are in the U.S. that teaches different workshops, and just it's a very very nice community over there in Chicago. I've met the founder, and she's really nice. I think it's Amy. Is that her name? Is
Karen Ami.
Karen Amy? Yeah, exactly. And very nice people, but. I'm glad you are trying all these techniques, all these experiments, and because that's what it is with mosaics. After you start knowing a little bit, I know when you take a workshop, you learn as much as you can take, like you said, because there's so much information. I mean, I went to school for 3 years, and I learned with time, basically, and we didn't even touch class till the second year, so. I can understand you what it is, and that's how I treat when I teach mosaics. I try to teach things that they could use right away once they leave that workshop until they get some other more information. That way, they'll go step by step.
Honestly, Carlos, when I found out that you had attended the school for 3 years in Italy, I was so impressed. And I someday I want to sit down with you and just take in everything that you can share with me about that. In any case, I kind of learned mosaics in a different way. First, by just being self-taught, but then I really realized how important it was to get some really good education, get a solid foundation, and it's still, I still am learning by myself too. I had wanted to take a workshop and learn more about slate. I had never used slate before, but during the pandemic, I decided I would get on YouTube and check out all these slate artists and see what they were doing. And I bought some slate tile from a materials rock yard, basically. And I started making some slate work. So I really love slate.
Can you detail on how you cut the slate?
Well,
a little bit, because some people don't. I mean, they've never used it before, and
right.
I've used it a couple times. So they're like very thin layers.
Yes.
So maybe you can kind of be a little bit more descriptive on like how someone who wants to work with that can kind of have a better idea before they take a workshop or something.
So first of all, I thought you needed to have like a wet saw to cut it. But in fact, I have never used a wet saw in any of my pieces so far, although I bought a wet saw. Okay.
Okay.
Just so I could really start. But I learned that through YouTube that there's one artist, and I've forgotten who that is right now, but that person actually would use the blade on a wood planer. So if you think about planing wood by hand, there is a wide thin blade that is used, that is attached to that tool. And if you buy that, which you can online, you can use that as instead of a chisel trying to split the end, the layers of the slate, you can put that up on the edge.
Is it kind of like grinding cheese in a way? Kind of like grinding cheese?
Yes,
going
and then you have a little
from
hammer and you tap the top of that blade into the slate, and it works really nicely. I mean, it's a great tool for slicing the slate into layers. Now, once those layers are thin layers, then what I would do is sometimes I would use wheeled nippers to further reduce that, and also other kind of tools that you use to actually break.
Do you use a specific nipper that you like? Because I know some are like the width of the cut that you can do. Some are smaller and some are bigger than other ones, and then some are wheels that have like tungsten carbide, or they have like these just stainless steel. So do you use a specific brand, or do you have one that you like most that's lightweight? Because I know some people don't like them because the hand hurts after a while.
Well, my hands are really strong, so I never worry about that. But I think, at least for the stone, for
Yeah.
the slate, I like using just lippinettes.
Oh, okay.
Now, when I'm doing my glass work and I'm looking at little pieces of glass, I'd be using Montolits.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
because they and
those are
they
nice.
I use them totally when I am cutting like gold smalty, but usually I use them for just smalty. Now, big pieces of smalty, I'm going to use the hammer and hardy.
So you
So,
basically use all the tools that you've learned from these workshops. I mean, you using the hammer. Do you have two tungsten carbide size, or is it just one? For the people who are listening, there are hammers that weigh different. Some weigh more than others. Some have two tungsten carbide.
yeah,
There's actually like an Italian hammer also that they sell, and it's very interesting because some people would think, I'm just going to get a hammer, but there's different things about
there are really all kinds of hammers, and I think there are people that buy every kind of hammer there is.
it. Yeah, I'm
And of
sure.
course, I bought a hammer before I knew anything.
But they're not cheap,
No, they're
David, are
not
they?
cheap. Now
Yeah.
they're a lot more expensive now than they were. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah, that
guess
too.
one thing I would advise is don't try to go for the heaviest hammer. I
Yeah.
kind of thought that you needed a heavy hammer to actually cut the material,
Yeah.
but in reality, you don't.
No,
So now
not
I buy
necessarily.
pretty lightweight hammers.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I found that out when I finished school and I went to work for the Mosaic studio in Colorines in Mexico. And they make their own hammers. I don't know if you know
ah,
that, but they make this really thin hammers and they're just stainless steel. I don't think they even have tungsten carbide on the sides, but they cut glass really well. And they're very light just because the projects are so big. I mean, once you work in a studio, when you have like 20 or 30 people working on a project, after a while your hand gets tired. If it's like a full-time job for people who are there all day, like from Monday through Saturday, and they just keep cutting and cutting, like 950 gram, which is, I think that's the heaviest, it just hurts after a while.
right. That way too heavy.
Yeah.
Even if you're Popeye, you know.
Yeah. I
I have
mean,
to tell you, that's another thing I'm really impressed by you, Carlos, and that is working in Mexico at Colinas. Um,
yeah.
I had wanted to, they used to, I think there was a way to take a workshop there
Yeah,
in
they
the
had
past.
workshops in the past. I know, well, they did like these residencies, I think, and people would go down there and then they would work when a certain project, and then they would kind of teach every once in a while some workshops. But they're a company, so they're more interested in like the big projects, like subway projects and just murals all over the world. So um, it's even hard to get into like buy materials sometimes, just because it has to be kind of like by an appointment, and the colors are there's not like a palette really. I mean, they're just these big bags of just smalty all over the place, which is just it's crazy. It's crazy. It's like,
Well, I love Mexican smalty.
yeah. Do you
And
like the two tones?
the reason is because oftentimes the surface of the smalty will be different from the inside of the smalty,
Mm-hmm.
and the backside of the smalty could be a different shade or value than any of the other two. And so you can buy one color of smalty and you may end up with three versions of that. So what that does is just increase my palette tremendously.
Yeah.
And what I like to do with the Mexican smalty is oftentimes I like to facet using wheeled nippers
Yeah.
the surface,
Mm-hmm.
and
So you
so
can
what
have
you're
like
getting is
two
both the
tones.
surface color and then inside color,
Yeah.
which adds to the richness of the mosaic for me.
Yeah. That's great. I do that with marble. Like if I have like I'm doing like a portrait or something, and I have a piece of kind of travertine marble, and I just want like kind of get like a little piece of the inside, I'll chip it off with the hammer and just use that, just kind of like what you're doing with the smalty. Just because the Mexican smalty does have a variation of colors for people who don't know the smalty compared to the Italian smalty, which is more common, that normally people would buy, which is their Sony one, and then there's the Donna, and there's a new person that participates. His name is Federico Morasuti. He has these new glass smalty that are very cool because he worked in Visazza for like 30 years. So he's not a mosaic artist. He just makes these glass, and he makes like what you're saying, like these colored smalty with like all these colors inside. You should look up the website. I think it's Morasuti Mosaici. I think that's what's .com.
I will.
That interesting, yeah. I mean, the whole world of color in smalty is interesting, you know, compared to the mosaic glass compared to stained glass. I mean, they're both amazing, but they're just that how you feel them, right? Like there's a big difference between feeling stained glass, which is kind of thin, and then the roughness of the thickness of a smalty tessera that you could normally use to make them.
You can have dimension, texture, those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I saw, like, now that we're talking about dimensions, I saw the piece that I don't know if you're really famous for it, but I know a lot of people just love this piece. It's called Tribal Rhythm. And can you explain this to the audience that's listening to this podcast? What
Sure,
did you
I'm
create with
looking at
that?
it.
Because it's, you know,
I'm looking at it in my studio
great.
right now, which so
And it's for sale.
It's really kind of at the beginning stage. So
Yeah.
clearly, I'm not famous for anything, I don't think. But right now, where I am is I have I developed the design, and then what I did was I worked with terracotta slabs. So I rolled out terracotta to about 1/2 inch thickness.
Yeah.
And then I transferred the design that I'm creating on top. And then I used tools to cut out elements based on the design. And so I did that. Then I let those elements dry so that they could be fired. Okay.
Yes,
But
we're
before I
listening.
did that, I made sure that on the back of each piece, I numbered them.
Yeah. Yeah, like a
once
mosaic.
I got them out of the kiln, I would know where they actually go. So right now I'm staring at this. What I have
Yeah.
is a triptych. I have these 3
You can
panels.
move the camera if you like, so people who
Oh.
watch the video, if you want, you could show it to us. That way people who are listening can go on to the YouTube channel and can check it out. He's actually in the studio, and it just looks very nice. I like people's art studios. Well,
so if you can see that, so I have the three panels. They're about 1.5 feet wide by 2 feet tall, and they're on Ouija board. And I framed them with aluminum, angle aluminum.
Yeah.
So they're framed and ready to go. And then what I did was, can you see that?
Yeah, and these pieces are for people who are listening. The Ouija board is just a board that you use for bathrooms in a way that's very light, so that way your mosaic won't be heavy once it's done. And what I'm looking through the video is just he's done these ceramic terracotta pieces, and they're just very, it gives kind of like an optical illusion look to it, and they're lines, but they're like crossed, and it has kind of like this certain design that he has made, and they're different colored because obviously the terracotta is just makes different colors of the browns. So that's like the base for it, and there's spaces in between these pieces that he's made and he's cooked, and I'm sure you're gonna put glass in between them.
Yes, what I'll be doing is actually cutting the smalty
Yeah.
to go in the channels. And
Okay.
so basically what's possible is that you can have different levels of the glass.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm waiting on some glass from Mosaic to come in this week because
Okay.
I need to have the B cuts or the pizzas.
Yeah.
Because this is a bigger. The designs are bigger, and I wanted to have. I wanted to be able to use more dimensional smalty
Yeah.
for areas.
What's the thickness of these pieces that you've made with terracotta?
Well, I think the pieces are generally. I I think maybe 3/8 inch.
3/8. Okay.
Um, I'm debating whether or not that was too thick.
Yeah.
You know, every
For the
time I
glass you
make a
can put around
mosaic,
it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
everything's like an experiment. And
Yeah.
I kind of equate mosaics to problem solving. It always seems like I'm always having to solve some issue, you know?
Yeah.
How does this really speak? Is this really expressing what I want it to express? Is there a better way for me to do this? If I look at the andamento, I actually, before we started the call, I was actually taking one of the designs and experimenting with the way I was going to cut the pieces.
Yeah.
So I
Exactly.
was drawing out possible andamento
Yeah.
to get a feel for what really would express what I want, which is I want to have movement and I want to have rhythm. And I have a pretty clear idea of how I create rhythm in my pieces.
Yeah.
I like to have this contrast between glass, which is really alive, and then the terracotta, which is really kind of
Yeah, and the color
dead in a
combination
way,
is
or
also important, right? Like after all that, you have to think about what kind of colors you want to use.
right. And with that terracotta, actually, what I've done when the clay was still wet, I added oxides, which are
Okay.
color pigments,
Yeah.
basically. And I brushed those on.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, well, I guess I first
You glazed
texturized
them kind
the clay,
of.
and
Okay.
then I did the kind of liquid oxides, and then I
Mm-hmm.
rubbed them off. So the reason we see different colors with that fired terracotta now is because of the
Yeah.
oxides I used. And you know, sometimes you don't really, well, not sometimes, you never really know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So that's part
Exactly.
of the art part of it.
Especially in ceramics, right? Like ceramics, it's way different than just having glass come in and just kind of use what a
Yes,
little bit.
and I have to tell you, I really lucked out there. After the second workshop with Ilana Shafir, I came home and at that time there were still like phone books, you know, and I
Mm-hmm.
went through the phone book trying to see if we had any ceramic studio in town. And San Antonio
Mm-hmm.
is a pretty large town, so you know,
Yeah.
chances are we probably could have something. And I found one, and I called up the person, the owner, and I told her that I didn't want to throw a pot and I didn't want to learn about all the chemistry. I know there's all kinds of chemistry with ceramics and the
Oh yeah.
glazes, and I didn't care. All I wanted to do was play. I wanted to play with clay to put into my mosaics, and I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to play with glazes. And she was thrilled because she didn't have people like me show up very often.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good conversation.
So that's
And you got
so
the whole
sometimes you
roll.
just
You got
have
the
to put
roller
yourself
too.
out there and
You got the
not
whole
know
thing
where
for
you're going,
ceramics.
but just try it.
Yeah, you got the whole thing for ceramics, like the rolling out the
Well,
clay
you
and.
know, that's the good thing about a studio. You can rent time or access,
Oh,
so you can use their
okay.
tools.
Yeah.
In this case, the owner of that studio retired, but she has her own studio in her house.
Hmm.
So she invited me over, and so we did the rolling, and then I brought it back here. I did all the
Yeah.
cutouts. I dried it here, took it back to her big kiln,
Because
and
she has
had
a
it
kiln,
done. But
obviously.
you
Yeah.
can do it at a local studio. There's a lot of different ways. You don't have to buy all that.
I'm sure you
So
remember what temperature you cooked that ceramic to, right? Over like what,
well,
800, 1800 maybe?
actually, I didn't. I don't know
No?
because I loaded the kiln,
Yeah.
and she put
pressed
the
the buttons.
temperature on, and I came
Yeah.
back in 2 days. So
Yeah. It takes.
and
Yeah.
you know, the reality is, even if I were in the commercial studio, if I went over to the studio that she had, I would do the same thing. I would have rolled out the thing there.
Yeah.
I would have taken it home because I'd rather spend my hours in my studio here. Then I would have dried it here, the pieces, and then I would have taken it back there, and they would have loaded it in their kiln, and I would have
Yeah.
paid them for the firing.
Yeah.
So in fact, I did more working with my friend because I loaded all my pieces, which
Yeah.
is a good thing.
No, it's
But
awesome.
I have to tell you, you know, you think, you know, you draw it all out perfectly, right, from the design.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have it dried. And of course, it's going to shrink. So that's going to change everything. And then you put it in the kiln. But there's like these little kiln elves that I don't know what happens, but it always seems like there's some pieces missing. You know, there's just some pieces missing,
Yeah.
which for me, I don't worry about because it just provides me another opportunity to use a similar materials, a color material in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is kind of add the surprise. If someone really looks closely at my mosaics,
Yeah.
they'll quickly see that it's not perfect at all. There's a lot. They may think I did it on purpose, but probably
Yeah.
I was solving a problem.
And that's what happens when you're a mosaic artist and when you're an artist like that. When you work with these materials, you discover things. Like you said, it's a puzzle, right? And
Right.
most people, you know, it's funny because when I teach the workshops, and we draw the design underneath the mosaic. So when they encounter a certain problem and they're stressing about it, I'm like, remember we drew it. Like no one's gonna see the design underneath it. Just as long as you know the technique, just try to go around it. If you already did something that's not going towards the fundamental that you wanted to, just don't worry about it. Just draw that little line and just forget about that little line that we drew and just add a bigger piece. And then I won't say anything, you know? And they're like, yeah, fine. And then because sometimes it's kind of stressful, like when they try to follow the design exactly how it is. But most artists, when they do mosaics, we try to go by the lines, but sometimes, like you said, you have to experiment. And I think that's great. I think you're doing a great job. These pieces are awesome. I like them. I mean, every time I look at it, I think it's very original. And now that you tell me this, that how they come out after they're in the kiln, I think it gives it another great point to talk about. Great conversation when when someone wants to take this piece home. So
I
and when you come to North Carolina, because you said you were going to come, I have a surprise for you because we're making some glass here in North Carolina, and I'm going to give you some pieces so you can take back.
Oh my
So
gosh,
hopefully you could come over here sometime soon, and then I'll show you what we're doing besides just the workshops and things like that.
I can't wait. Our daughter lives in North Carolina. I don't think very far away from you. So, you
Yeah,
know, I think, you know, after the pandemic kind of settles down, we'll be going up there to visit. So,
yeah, because you live in San Antonio, right?
right, right.
So I'm going to try something new with this podcast. So you're going to be the first one to try it out, David.
Okay.
I'm gonna say 5 words related to mosaics, and then just tell me off the bat what's in your mind and what you think of these words once I say them. Is that good?
Yep.
All right. Mosaics. Fast.
Oh, you want me to respond right now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll say the words, and then you'll respond, and then just whatever comes out of your mind. Like when I say the word, just say oh, like for instance, right now, mosaics.
Um, Imperfection becoming perfect.
Perfect. How about andamento?
Flow, direction.
Color.
Color depends on what colors are around the color.
Nice.
Color's always changing on you.
Certain waves changing. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
How about tessera?
Well, Tessera, that's That's what mosaics
It's all
consists of.
about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the building
exactly.
blocks.
And if you don't know what tested is, look it up. You'll definitely know what it is, right? And
Yeah.
I'll make the last one easy. Hammer or Hardy? I mean, hammer or nippers?
Each has its place.
There you go. Well, that's awesome.
I use
Great.
I use both.
You use both? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you're in it in this medium or even with ceramics, I think everybody has both. They just use them for certain projects. Well, I think that was interesting. We get a better idea of what you have in your mind. And you know what? I call it like the zone, like when people do mosaics. So when people tell me, you must have a lot of patience when you do mosaics, I'm like, it's not patience. Like it's a mind game in there. It's like I'm a Vikings fan, right? I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan. I grew up there. So I'm like ready to kick the final field goal to make it to the final Super Bowl game.
Right.
And I gotta find where I need to kick that ball when I'm doing mosaics. I mean, I even have those kind of thoughts in my head when I'm trying to construct things. I don't know if you have that too, but I just think it's very fun, and I'm glad you're doing it and you're having a blast. And I can tell you have the workshop. So if people in San Antonio listen to this podcast, please look up David. You'll definitely have a lot of fun over there with him with some workshops, and he will teach you a lot of things that he's been learning with these great artists, like he commented.
One thing, I think I was trained to ask certain questions when I'm working. And before I start a project, the question that I ask is, why mosaic? Why am I using this medium to try to express this? And I think some ideas and some concepts lend themselves to mosaics in ways that painting doesn't, or drawing. Um, so I guess that's one of the things about my work. I always consider, why am I doing a mosaic of this? How does this really create something that's
Yeah.
unique?
No, and it shows. I mean, from what I see from your webpage, I get the feeling when I look at it. I mean, I'm used to looking at a lot of mosaics from around the world. I just had an interview from a friend of mine from Croatia, and he does really cool stuff too. But just there's certain artists that just have a feeling for it, and they express their feelings while making these great mosaics. And then obviously when they're done, that same feeling stays on with that mosaic. And I think you have that. And I think a lot of
Thank you.
mosaic artists, and that's why I'm doing this podcast, because it not just looking at the mosaic, but also what is behind the scene of the artist who makes that mosaic. And because a picture uh with a painting it's okay, but with the mosaic it's not the same. And looking at a picture online than being actually in a gallery and looking at these great mosaics. But uh I guess that's what we have to keep going and doing these exhibitions in person to keep this going, and we will eventually.
I think so. And I guess I think pretty soon we're going to be, if we continue to do virtual exhibitions, I think they're going to have a lot more short video that gives you a better feel of the dimensions, the texture, and things like that. Um, I think that's going to be very helpful in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I commented on having like these 3D cameras for the next exhibitions that they're doing in CMA,
Right.
because that would help a lot. Like have someone, I mean, someone could send the work somewhere to a certain, place where a studio where someone is just has some space to put like all these mosaic art pieces, and then just have like this 3D camera and just go around and tape all of them in 3D. And I think that would be really cool. But I don't know. My mind just only has certain enough space to do all these things, you know? Uh, I think I got to keep focusing on the glass material and the projects that we have coming up for 2022. But it was a pleasure.
Recently, I was
Yeah.
visiting a well-known mosaic artist who does public work
Okay.
here in San Antonio. He does really large public mosaics, and I took a picture of him,
Yeah.
and I I put it on the Facebook page of the Austin Mosaic Guild,
Okay.
and shared a link about his work. But the Facebook asked if you want to have it be a 3D picture
Oh yeah.
when you're putting it on, and I said yes. And so it's so interesting. It looks like you're right there with him. It's amazing. It's like, gosh, it's shocking. So
Yeah.
that's another thing that I think that we're going to just be able to see so much more
Yeah.
of the real medium of mosaic in the future.
That's a good
Um,
example.
so I can't wait.
Yeah, and if we go way beyond the metaverse, I was talking to a friend who does web design. I mean, a little bit out of the subject of the mosaics, but what's going to happen with public art in the virtual reality world? When people, how is that going to work? But I don't know. That's just something else to think
I
about in the future.
I don't know, but I have a person who has a sign company. He told me he went to a conference recently,
Yeah.
and that the ability to reproduce paintings is so good now, including brush strokes and texture and the surface, that he didn't really know my work, but he
Yeah.
said, there's coming a point where they're going to be
Yeah.
creating this just without you. So, but
Yeah.
I thought, mosaics will be the last one.
Yeah.
Because I
Mosaics
think
will
it's
be.
really
Well, they'll have
difficult
to
to
have your
create.
permission, I think.
What?
They'll have to have your permission. I mean, because
Well,
no one's going to make anything, like what you're making, for instance.
right.
So that's a
And
good
that's
thing
one
because
thing I like to do
you're
with
gonna
my
get paid
work
eventually.
is
Yeah.
I want to make it so it's difficult for someone else to recreate.
Yeah.
Like it's that unique that it just would be hard for them to do it, because it's
Yeah.
your own handwriting, it's your own way of doing it. So
I look at it as a legacy, to be honest with you. I look at it as something, I mean, every time I make something, and I like, there's this quote that you said, beauty is not necessarily about something being perfect or whole. And you know what? That's one of the things that I take to mosaics. What I do, I'm not going there to make it perfect. I'm not going there to follow a design specifically. And that's why I just didn't really stay in mosaic studios that are really like just professional. They'll grab a painting from someone, an artist, and they'll just or do logos and things like that. I like them, and I learn from it. But I think the world's not perfect. We're not perfect, and I think we could show it with mosaics. And they look, and like I always say, you can never go wrong with the mosaic. I mean, they're broken. How can you go wrong? The only thing we're doing is we're fixing them, and
that's right.
they leave pretty happy after the workshop.
Yeah.
Um, well, you know what? I love talking to you, man. To be honest with you, David, I think it was a pleasure. Next time, I hope to invite you again because you have a lot of things to talk about, and especially like maybe the workshops next time that you do and what kind of workshops you do. And I had a blast. To be honest with you, it was a
I
good
did
chat.
too. And maybe
Yeah,
next time I'll have tribal rhythm finished.
yeah, and that way you could show us exactly. You
Yeah.
might even have it sold by then. I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? You never know.
Yeah. And I really appreciate it. And thank you for taking me into your studio. And everything's looking good in the background. So have a
Okay.
good
Well,
day. And I'll talk to you soon.
okay. You take care, Carlos. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.